everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome to another episode review for Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens. This is Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens episode 32, and I am not alone. I am joined by Pete. You definitely know Pete if you've watched my channel before. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing good, dude. It's good to be here, and I love doing these late night videos.
Yeah, it's like 3 a.m. It's a good time. But yeah, we hope you're all doing well, and thank you for coming to the review. I wanted to bring Pete on because this was a loaded episode. There was so much that happened. This is probably going to be a very long review for that reason, but I felt like this was one of those episodes where if you think about Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens and when the show really kind of kicked into gear or did something very memorable, I feel like this is one of those episodes.
Yeah, this could be it.
And so I want to give my general impressions real quick and just kind of run through some really monumental plot points. And the first one is, generally speaking, I thought it was a great episode. Not only was the Asana Yuga stuff really great, but the backstory for Asana was an added bonus. And what happened with Goha and Mimi at the end was also crazy. So we learned so much in this episode, and like and then Asana maximum summoning, of course. And once you see Asana wins and maximums, you're like, all right, yeah, that was a really good episode. Then you have that at the end with Mimi and President Drone. I guess that's what we're going to call him. That's what he was on the cast list. It was like, Jesus, man. Just kind of blew my mind at how much was in this episode. Asana Matsuba, I want to say this before I get into the review. Let's not overlook that this is a historical moment for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. This is the first time, without any weird gimmick happening, that a girl duelist defeated our main protagonist. The first time in the history of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime.
It's crazy.
It's crazy to even say that. The only other two times it happened, Rebecca defeated Yugi, Yugi surrendered, and Yuzu defeated Yuya in the beginning of Arc 5. Yuya forgot how to pendulum summon. So every time a girl duelist has defeated our protagonist, there's always been some funky gimmick involved. In this, there was no gimmick whatsoever. Asana just completely out-dueled Yuga and blindsided him, much like Neil did with that insane maximum summoning. So, congratulations to Asana for becoming the first girl character to pull that off. And again, doesn't really surprise me that it was Sevens. Girl characters, I think, have been treated...
They've done great.
Yeah, better than any other Yu-Gi-Oh! Show. And I mean, you've seen the beginnings of Duel Monsters, GX 5Ds, all of Reigns. I mean, quantity and quality, it's not even really comparable.
Yeah, it really isn't.
Yeah.
It just the...
I mean, does Alexis have a win yet in GX where you are?
No.
And you're more than a dozen episodes in. So, like...
I'm way farther.
Exactly. And is she the only girl duelist that's in the show?
I mean, of relevance.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Her Obelisk Blue friends, come on.
No.
So, like, Sevens has done a very good job with that. And, again, Asana was a great character. Her love for R6 was interesting.
That's a way to put it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And the fact that she hates drones that speak like humans, I immediately thought of Revolver from Vrains. Yeah. But it makes sense because they kind of made her grandfather's dueling style, her family dueling style, completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that at the end of this episode, a theory that's been going around is that Asana's the person who was maybe Mr. Goha. We may never know his name, but it could have been Asana's great-grandfather.
You can't say that it's not. Because it was clearly a man.
It was an older man.
And the man was older and had silver hair.
And was in connection with Asana because the assistant came in and reported on Yuga's friends being sent just like the plan was.
Yeah.
So, if that was Asana's great-grandfather, then not only did the great-grandfather kind of betray the family...
He's also dead.
But he's also dead, and he was killed by a drone that speaks like humans, which is what Asana says in this episode she hates. So, a lot of potential tie-ins there, and how Asana's going to react to it when she finds out if that is her grandfather, of course. It's going to be very interesting. Remember, before we get that scene, we see Asana looking at the Goha building.
Great shot.
Yeah, really good
awesome
shot. After she defeats Yuga. And, of course, the big moment in this episode is her maximum summoning that massive worm monster. Also, the jokes between what's the difference between worm and dragons. We, as Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, have been trying to figure that out for the last 20 years. So that was hilarious that, Rook asked that, and he was like, I have no idea what the difference is.
Very meta.
Very meta, very relevant. And how was Asana able to maximum summon? I have no idea. Rook seemed to have figured out that this was a trap based on the pigeon giving him where the Dark Rush Duel tournament was going to take place. So Asana knew, again, it was all set up and seemingly all orchestrated by Mr. Goha at the top.
Yeah.
So there's a lot here, but by the time Rook realizes and makes the connection that Schwerbird, I don't remember his name, yeah, something like that.
They kept using that as like
what he was saying. At the end of
it was almost like it was like an insult. It almost seemed like,
yeah,
didn't it?
Yeah. It was similar to, I think, how, you know, that cat used like nya at the end of all the sentences. I think
don't remind me.
And so by the time Rook realizes that it's too late, and much like when Gakuto realized what Neil was doing, he tries to call out to Yuga. It's too late. Asana gets her maximum summon off. And right before she makes that maximum summon, she seems to be a little disappointed that the duel's going to come to an end, because she was enjoying Rush Duels. It was her first ever Rush Duel. And I really do believe that... Here's an interesting theory.
Okay, throw it at me.
Neil assisted Mr. Goha and the Machine Cavalry Club in getting maximum summoning to Asana to defeat Yuga.
I mean, I think it's pretty logical.
I mean, that I just kind of came to me. That's not really a crazy theory. I think Neil probably has something to do with this.
It has to be, because he's the original creator of the summoning method. We've seen the lengths that it took Yuga and the group to go through to just recreate their own maximum summoning that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's completely plausible.
And remember, the scene in episode 27, I believe it was the scene right after Rook got the invitation from the pigeon. Mm-hmm. That's when Neil goes in to talk to Mr. Goha.
Right.
Right after. Almost like those two scenes.
He calls him naive.
Those two scenes kind of set the trajectory for this moment. Yeah. Where Asana was going to use Neil's tactics, and the pigeon was going to get Rook and Yuga to be where they
That's
need
a pretty
to be.
good theory. That could be the case.
I think Neil has to be involved here. Also, the opening change was very interesting.
Yes.
Neil, Asana,
really that one
Yuga,
shot.
and Roa tied to Otis.
7
with
colors.
The 7 colors all leading to Otis.
It definitely has to be Otis. I know you can't see the face, but the cape, it's got to be Otis.
Yeah.
Gives more into my theory that Sevens were looking for fossils. We hear more about them digging again in this episode, or at least hints to it. Mm-hmm. You know, are we taking, again, this is early speculation, but are we taking a 5Ds route here? Yeah. That's what I said when we were watching the episode of, like, all of these characters have some kind of ace monster, and they're all tied in some way to some kind of event happening. Mm-hmm. And we see Yuga, Neil, Asana, and Roa all together. 3 of those characters have maximum summoned. And does that mean Roa's getting a maximum? One's the main protagonist, and 3 of the other characters have all been the villain of an arc. Of that arc, yeah. So it's definitely a symbolic scene. We don't know Asana's tie-in to Otis. That's the only one that we don't really have any info on. So we don't really even know Otis's ties to how this works. Is he connected to Goha? Who is Otis? Or like, what is that? Right. All those are going to have to be answered. Maybe Otis created the Mr. Goha drone. Could be. Like, that theory could be that he's playing both sides of the coin that you had. Right. Could be. So, very fascinating. Yeah. And then, of course, what happens at the end of this episode with Mimi wanting... And again, this is Mimi's character. She's always, I don't think it's her being greedy. She's always... I think it's her being a little naive. But she's always wanted to take her career to that next step. Yeah. She's worked her ass off, and she finally gets the opportunity to be the president of Goha. Yeah. But at a cost. You know, there's always... There's literally a dead man who just wore it. Right. And there. So I think there's a little naivety there. Like, you have to kind of read the room a little better and say, no, I don't want to. Although I think if she said, no, I don't want to, I don't think President Drone's letting her leave. Yeah. I don't think President Drone's letting her leave. There's an argument to be made there. And so the mask comes on, locks into her neck, electrocutes her. Yeah. And is she going to start losing her mind? Changes the voice, the eyes turn red. Is she going to start losing her mind with the psychological toll? I think the funny thing is Mr. Goha is going to be so much shorter. Will anyone point that out? Yeah. That would be probably a comedic bit. And that guy's dead. Yeah, I mean, he's dead right in front of her. I think, yes, it fit into Mimi's character completely, and we've been rising to this of how she wants to be the leader of Goha. Yeah. Like, she said that. If you were her, and you worked your whole life to get, you're 37, you worked your whole life to get here, it's right in front of you. Wouldn't you take it? Regardless of what you just saw with the previous owner, you know, user of this head has just passed away. I think it's a little bit of naivete. It's also a lust for power. Yeah. And trying to realize and fulfill the dreams that you've made up in your head, your imagination. It's literally there in front of you for the taking. How can you not? Yeah. And so she's that temptation could be her downfall.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting question, and one of the most fascinating things for me of who has the real control in there. Is it the head? Is it her? Do they share it? I said this during the episode, and maybe some people will know what I'm referencing. It feels very Dr. Fate of DC Comics, where different people can put on the helmet, and you get the powers of Dr. Fate. And really, there's some of the person formerly that was that person is in there, but it's really Fate, the spirit in the helmet, controlling the actions of the person.
Yeah.
And so, could that be the situation where, like, we get a shot here where Mimi is talking to herself subconsciously inside the helmet. We might be able to see her talk to the helmet, but that's only between the two of them, like almost like a neuron link between the two of them. But it's really the outward personification of that character is the helmet only.
Right, so Mimi can't speak any of her actual feelings or thoughts.
The only thing is there, as I think right now, it could be gradually over time, right? Because she did say, wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So that's Mimi.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
as we go on, does the helmet take over more and more?
Yeah.
And so that balance is going to be fascinating.
Yeah. Overall, though, your thoughts on the episode?
It was great. Definitely, I wasn't a huge fan of last week's episode. I mean, yeah, I understand it was a plot device. It was building some of these characters out, like a Django, who was briefly in this episode. Yeah. But yeah, this by and far plot, action, theory, capabilities that you could have. I think it nailed it. Do we want to go into some like the fascinating parts that we can talk about?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's talk about Asana.
Yeah.
And you bring up that she doesn't like drones that speak like humans, right?
Yeah.
Because it kind of drove her family out of business.
Yeah.
So that implies that she is against Goha, right? And she's looking at the cityscape. She is the family that built the city, but the city could have been built, and then this corporation, much like a Walmart, kind of came up and took power and destroyed the local area of small businesses.
Because even though the creator of Goha and the creator of the machine
seemed to be friends
at some point down that family line,
it broke.
It could have broken.
Right,
easily.
and we see that a lot even in real life, where you have people that create things, they were two friends and then they split off because they had different ideas, and usually one is the success and one is the one that gets forgotten about as the failure. Yeah. And that seems to be very much the case here. So that implies that her family and her herself would have deep resentment towards Goha and Mr. Goha at that point.
Absolutely.
So, not getting too much into theories, it would be very interesting if her grandfather somehow went against those principles and became the literal president of the corporation that the family detests. Yeah. Now, that's a theory, so we won't dive too far into that. Might not be her
great-grandfather.
But it more implies to me that she does hate Goha Corporation, but Goha is using 6th Elementary and the Machine Cavalry Club as a pawn that they don't even realize. That's what it seems like is happening.
Yeah, and there's definitely a tie-in between the two directly because of the assistant walking into Goha's office and saying, Yuga's been transferred to 6th Elementary
as planned.
Right, as you requested or as you planned, So clearly this whole thing was orchestrated by Mr. Goha.
I just don't think Asana and that group is aware of that. I think they are very much, they believe they're in control.
Well, because I also think that Asana and her group have motivations that benefit from what they're doing that differ from what Goha wants to do. Because remember, they want to dig up this thing. So
which could be implied of what that was in this episode.
Right, a way to duel on machines.
Right, which was an old way to kind of speed duel almost is kind of what they implied.
So I wonder if rush dueling is going to get kind of a different way.
So it could just be literally rush duelings on their machines. Could be. Somehow that basically it's an archaic thing that only the club does. And it was maybe more pervasive through the culture of this was the way to do it. Yeah. And then Goha beat them to it because, fancy technology, right? It takes over and beats the outdated stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? Newer is always better, right? Is the idea. Yeah. And so is there some kind of ancient machine or something that her grandfather implied was lost, right? When she was a little kid, we went to that flashback, and that's what they're digging. Yeah. And you symbolize, too, all the machines usually dig things. They're excavators. we're digging, like, you know, we're going with that theme there as well.
Of course.
But yeah, a lot of interesting ties to see where people's loyalties lie. The only other thing I thought was interesting about Asana, which is a lot of things interesting, was she seems very much like Neil, but in a little bit different of a way, to appreciate and are fascinated by rush duels and Odo Yuga.
Yeah. Every time, this was another thing that was kind of weird. Every time she spoke about enjoying rush duels,
they shushed her.
Her two assistants who love and worship her shushed her. And then she even at one point started shushing herself, like to kind of
almost like remind herself, like, oh,
and
crap.
I wonder if Goha, she knows that Goha is watching them, and if they start to enjoy rush duels, Goha might just cut them.
It could be because they could have some kind of deal. They could have some kind of deal there.
That was weird.
Or it's a thing of like they don't want they sought out a quest, right? Their whole purpose was to rid rush duels and bring back an original style of dueling because it was beautiful and pure and things like that.
Right.
What if it's just, hey, don't fall in love with this? It's like, you know, sometimes you could hate something from afar and then you start doing it and you're like, actually isn't that bad. You know, like, so you want to keep that mindset of like, no, negative, this is negative. So it could be that too.
Yeah. Really a lot of interesting stuff in this episode, and we probably didn't even start scratching the surface, but for a review, I mean, we both really liked the episode, and we gave kind of some theories and thoughts on the major stuff that happened. If you want really more in-depth content on Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens, every Wednesday night we are part of a podcast talking Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's Up. It airs live right on this YouTube channel around 8, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We are usually joined by our friends Nick T and Calibro as well, so please consider tuning in Wednesday night to that podcast if you enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's and our complete over-analysis of every single thing. But I'm going to wrap up this review, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And a special thank you to my Platinum tier patrons, Horace Maye, Goosey Q, Panther J, Blue Maiden 28, Jarrett Buller, and Aura Dragon, and to my Diamond tier patrons, Jesse Wood, Latrell Smith, and Anime Kaput, and to my Egyptian God tier patrons, XZ's Lover 104, Pegasus Seiya, and Stella Sky. Thank you to everyone who is a Patreon of mine, and thank you to everyone who's a YouTube channel member. You guys are all amazing, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. Pete, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a blast.
Of course, man. For big episodes, we gotta do these group reviews.
Of course.
Absolutely. And if you want to see my reaction to Asana's maximum summoning and beating Yuga, I'm gonna try to have that up on YouTube by the time this comes out, as long as the copyright issues do not hinder that. So, check out my channel. If it's there, great. If it's not, well, it probably got a strike. Thank you all so much for watching. I will talk to you all down below. Give me your thoughts on this episode, and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.
See you guys.
Best for